the forbidden flame. Wild jasmine and honeysuckle perfumed the air, and their vibrant hues wallpapered the landscape. Myra, a young woman of striking beauty, was known as a free spirit with an inquisitive nature. Her hair, inky black, cascaded down her back in rivulets, and her bright green eyes held an audacious spirit that often unsettled others. During one sweltering summer evening, her curiosity stirred. Myra wandered into the forest and found herself in a clearing where Liam worked. A local woodsman by trade, Liam's wide shoulders and chiseled arms moved rhythmically as he wielded his axe, each swing sending chips of wood flying. Sweat trickled down his sun-kissed skin, catching the last rays of sunlight and making him glisten like a statue carved from bronze. His linen shirt was half opened, revealing his muscular chest and abdomen. An unexpected sensation stirred in Myra's depths, a yearning so potent she could almost taste the nervous anticipation on her tongue. Her heart pounded, the rhythmic beat echoing in her ears. Her eyes were glued to the figure before her, an embodiment of masculine perfection who held her captive without uttering a word. She drew in a shaky breath and was hit by his scent, a mix of earthy pine and musk that was so inherently male. It invaded her senses, making her unable to concentrate on anything else. Every nerve ending in Myra sparked to life as she watched him with wide-eyed fascination, entranced by the Adonis standing before her. Their eyes locked across the clearing, and something palpable passed between them, an attraction both immediate and powerful that neither could articulate nor rein in. Despite being betrothed to another woman, a match arranged by his family, Liam felt an irresistible pull toward Myra. Unable to deny the magnetic pull they felt toward one another, Myra and Liam began an intense relationship. Their rendezvous point was a forgotten cabin, nestled on the outskirts of their small town. Their stolen moments were filled with mutual warmth and longing. Each touch was a spark that stoked the fire within them, every kiss a sweet surrender. Whispers of their clandestine meetings circulated throughout the village. The elders strongly disapproved, cautioning them about the severe repercussions if they succumbed to their desires. Yet Myra remained unperturbed by these admonishments, too ensnared by her burgeoning feelings for Liam. One night, beneath the moon's silvery glow, Myra and Liam surrendered once more to their insatiable need for one another. Without warning, a grotesque beast materialized from the shadows of the surrounding woodland. Its guttural growl reverberated through the still night air, instantly shattering their intimate moment. Liam caught sight of it first, his eyes widening in terror at its monstrous form. By then, it was too late. The beast lunged, its talons sharp as glass as they ripped through Liam's shirt and into his flesh. The taste of iron flooded his mouth as his blood spurted from the gashes in his chest. He let out a guttural cry as his body convulsed and grew limp. Myra attempted to run but was trapped by the creature's unyielding grasp, its claws puncturing her skin like burning needles. Their screams of torment ricocheted off the towering trees as they struggled against the monster's steel-like hold. In their last shared moments under this relentless attack, Myra and Liam clung to one another with desperate strength. Their forbidden romance had taken a devastating turn, now tainted with remorse and overshadowed by the ghostly manifestation of their mistakes. Once sated, the monster disappeared back into the forest's shadowy depths as quickly as it had emerged, leaving behind a gruesome scene, two bodies savagely torn apart amidst trampled foliage. In the following days, a cold current of dread swept the village. The brutal fate of Myra and Liam hung in the air, their names whispered like forbidden curses. Their grisly end was a harsh reminder of the catastrophic consequences for those who dared to succumb to temptation's seductive charm. The craving consumed him, an insatiable hunger that gnawed at his core. John tried to push the dark yearnings from his mind, but the desires only grew more ravenous with each passing hour. Lust was a demon that didn't respond to reason or restraint, whispering seductive temptations until he could think of little else. As the sun slipped behind the trees, bathing the secluded country road in inky shadows, John's trembling hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. He knew if he surrendered to this madness, he would never claw his way back to sanity. His foot pressing harder on the accelerator, the old truck barreled down the lonely stretch of asphalt. John's knuckles turned white, the need to satiate his cravings becoming an animalistic compulsion. The trees whipped by in a blur as he raced toward the decrepit farmhouse on the outskirts of town. He had noticed the young woman who lived there several weeks back while driving the same road. A mere glimpse of her tending the garden, loose tendrils of chestnut hair framing her lovely face, was enough to ignite John's obsession. He knew stalking her was wrong, depraved even, but he was powerless against the lecherous entity that possessed his mind. It had slithered in slowly, injecting dark thoughts and perverse fantasies that soon dominated his every waking moment. At first, John managed to keep the demon at bay through sheer force of will. But as the days passed, the lust mounted, chipping away at his sanity until control was no longer an option. The farmhouse emerged ahead, a shadowy silhouette in the dusk. John's breaths came in rapid pants, sweat drenching his body. He jerked the truck onto the long dirt driveway, tires spitting up pebbles in their haste. The demon cackled in sadistic glee, savoring his imminent surrender. John killed the engine and exploded from the truck. Long strides carried him up the creaky porch steps to the front door, which he pounded on with a frenzied fist. When there was no answer, he simply turned the handle, the flimsy lock offering no resistance. The demon urged him on, fueling his reckless abandon. John ripped open closet doors and tore through rooms in search of his prize. At last he found her in the bedroom, curled up on the bed in a pool of amber light. The woman awoke with a start at the commotion. Her eyes widened in terror at the sight of the wild-eyed stranger towering over her. John drank in the delicate features that had haunted his waking dreams, the curve of her jaw, the full lips slightly parted in a gasp, the gentle swell of breasts rising and falling with each ragged breath. She attempted to scramble away, but John pounced, pinning her beneath his weight. He reveled in the warmth of her body, the floral scent of her hair, the rapid staccato of her heartbeat thrumming against his chest. The demon screeched in ecstasy as John finally surrendered, his need reaching a fever pitch. His rough hands fumbled as he tore away clothing. The woman squirmed and whimpered beneath him. As John prepared to take what he so ravenously craved, a sharp metallic click froze him in his tracks. His gaze traveled up to the woman's face, her terror replaced by a look of cold determination. In her trembling hands was a small revolver aimed squarely at his forehead. "I'll kill you," she warned in a low, even tone that sent an icy lance of dread into John's gut. There would be no sating his hunger that night. For the first time, his desire was replaced by stone-cold fear, the demon retreating with a hiss of displeasure. John slowly disentangled himself from the woman, keeping his movements non-threatening. He muttered a hoarse apology before slinking from the room like a dog with its tail tucked between its legs. The demon raged in fury at being denied its satisfaction. As John sped away from the farmhouse, the terrified face of the woman branded into his mind. Dark thoughts percolated. If lust could not be sated through consent, perhaps violence was the key to silencing his tormentor, at least temporarily. The demon howled in approval at this grim realization, but John knew it was only a matter of time before he surrendered to its perverse urgings once again. The highway stretched before us, a barren ribbon of black under the hostile glare of our headlights. The radio's static hum had long since faded into an oppressive silence, leaving only the rhythmic screech of rubber against asphalt to fill the void. The air tasted metallic and cold like fear. Each breath I took was a struggle against the dread that coiled tight in my gut. "Alex, are we on track?" Jessica's voice cut through the quiet. She held a paper map in her hands, its edges crinkling under her anxious grip. In the age of GPS and digital convenience, it seemed archaic. But out in rural Georgia, where cell phone signals were as elusive as ghost stories, it was our sole lifeline. "We have no other choice," I replied tersely, my fingers white-knuckled around the steering wheel. Our journey from Atlanta had begun with excitement, a surprise visit to my parents' lakeside cabin, but now felt more like a descent into some grim fairy tale. Without warning, a figure emerged from the darkness at the road's edge, a hitchhiker's arm extended, pale and pleading, into our path. With an oath and a sharp swerve of the wheel, I narrowly avoided a collision. My heart pounded like war drums in my chest as I checked the rearview mirror. A woman stood alone on the barren highway. "Alex, stop," Jessica implored urgently. "We can't just leave her." Despite every horror movie cliché screaming at me not to stop for strangers on deserted roads late at night, I found myself putting the car into reverse. The stranger climbed into our back seat with an ethereal presence that sent chills down my spine. Her skin clung tightly to her bones beneath tattered remnants of what might once have been a sundress, while her eyes darted nervously between us. "I'm Jessica. This is Alex," Jessica said gently, her voice soothing in the tense silence. "What's your name? What happened?" "Lily," she replied, wrapping her arms around herself for warmth. She told us about a fight with her boyfriend during their camping trip and how he had left her alone. As we continued our journey, Lily shared more about their ill-fated expedition, an online discovered campsite that proved to be nothing but desolate woods and a stagnant lake. Her story took an eerie turn as she spoke of strange occurrences and anomalies in the water, fish with surplus eyes and misplaced teeth. A sign for Whispering Pines Lake appeared as we crested a hill. Our destination was within reach, but as I indicated to make the turn, Lily let out a terrified cry. "No, that's it, the campsite, don't go there." Her panic was tangible, filling the car with an icy dread. "But this is where we grew up, it's where our parents live," Jessica retorted, bewilderment heavy in her tone. Before we could digest Lily's reaction, Jessica announced that she finally had a signal on her phone. As she began dialing, blinding headlights flared in our rearview mirror, followed by the guttural roar of an engine. The world spun as metal crunched against metal and sent us spiraling toward the lake's edge. Through our shattered windshield I saw him, a man stumbling from a truck with an unsteady gait. Even in the dim light I recognized him. Tom. "Found you," he slurred menacingly, brandishing a filleting knife. Lily whimpered in terror while I frantically tried to shift into gear. But before I could act, another impact hit us, sending our car plunging into the icy depths of Whispering Pines Lake. The abrupt plunge of our car into the icy lake felt like a fist to my stomach, the chill water rushing in with a brutal shock. I wrestled with my seatbelt, fingers turning numb against the cold metal. Jessica thrashed beside me until her movements abruptly ceased. I tried to yell out, but only gulped down a mouthful of the bitter, algae-laced water. Something rough and solid scraped against my calf. In a panic, I kicked out and fortuitously struck the door handle. As our vehicle continued its descent into the depths, I pushed myself upward until it seemed like my lungs would burst from lack of oxygen. When I broke through to the surface, gasping for air, relief washed over me like a comforting blanket. The shore was tantalizingly close. Tom stood there, his face twisted in horror as our car vanished beneath the undulating surface of the lake. Exhausted but driven by adrenaline, I dragged myself onto the rocky shoreline where Tom was knee-deep in water, surrounded by figures that moved with an uncanny fluidity that marked them as non-human. One latched onto his leg and he screamed before being yanked under. Fear lent wings to my feet and propelled me into the forest until exhaustion claimed me. Shivering from cold and fatigue, nauseous from fear and shock, I collapsed near some lights flickering on a sign that read, "Whispering Pines Genetics, authorized personnel only." In that moment of clarity amidst chaos, I realized that what we thought were innocent cabins and campsites were nothing more than clever fronts for whatever unspeakable experiments were happening here. And Lily, sweet Lily, must have been part of their twisted plot. Despite every instinct screaming at me to run far away from this place as fast as possible, fatigue won out and forced me to rest against a tree trunk where sleep eventually came. I woke to hushed voices rustling through the leaves, and a man informing me that Jessica hadn't survived, but Tom was holding on. They also mentioned Jessica had been pregnant, and her unborn child would be valuable for their research. My eyes flickered open to see men in hazmat suits looming over me. One scanned my abdomen with a device and announced, "Fetus still viable," before ordering an immediate extraction. I tried to resist as they hoisted me onto a gurney, but my body refused to obey my commands. Under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights in sterile corridors, a woman in a lab coat approached me. Her eyes were devoid of warmth or empathy behind safety goggles. She nonchalantly informed me that my unborn child had already started adapting to the mutagen and would be their best specimen yet. I wanted to scream at her, tell her that my unborn baby was not hers to experiment with, that Jessica and our child weren't lab rats for her twisted experiments, but no words came out. She swabbed my arm with alcohol before plunging a needle into it. The sting was sharp, then everything faded into nothingness. Pain brought me back from oblivion. I wiped away tears as I looked at them, my children, lying in their clear incubators. I was shocked that there was more than one. Something was wrong. My daughter's skin began sprouting scales while my son's eyes took on an amphibian-like appearance. A familiar deep voice praised me. It was my father, the esteemed geneticist I'd always admired. He seemed proud of his grandchildren as if they were his crowning achievement. "Dad," I managed to say through clenched teeth, "why?" He turned toward me and for a moment he looked regretful before saying, "For the greater good, Alexandria. You'll understand someday." The following days passed in a haze of pain and recovery, while I attempted to make sense of what was happening around me. They allowed me to see my kids occasionally. They were changing at an alarming rate. My son developed gills that moved rhythmically with each breath. My daughter's skin could mimic her surroundings. They were awe-inspiring and terrifying. I knew I had to escape, so one night during a thunderstorm, I seized the opportunity when the guard was distracted. I swiped his keycard off a hook on the wall and sprinted through the echoing hallways. Alarms wailed as I made my way to the nursery where my children were housed. I wrapped them in blankets and ran barefoot into the stormy night toward the lake. At its edge, fear gripped me as my children squirmed, their gills fluttering and their skin blending with the dark water. They were no longer human, but they were still mine. I stepped into the icy water, feeling it lap against my legs as strange figures emerged around us. But I wasn't afraid. Instead, I hoped to introduce my children to their new environment. "Be free," I whispered through sobs as they disappeared into the water. This was where they belonged, far from whispering pines among others like themselves. After freeing my children, I did what seemed sensible at that moment. I hitchhiked to Virginia, a long way away from Georgia, but not far enough for comfort. Every news report about environmental issues or genetic advancements makes me wonder how many are just covers for what's truly happening beneath tranquil lakes and streams across our country. They'll find me eventually. My father has extensive resources. But by then, hopefully, journalists and watchdog organizations will have received evidence of his horrifying experiments that I've sent them. The truth about Whispering Pines and its monstrosities masquerading as progress will be revealed eventually. And if they apprehend me before everything is exposed, that's fine. My children are safe in that lake, and who knows, maybe they are our future. Metallic craving. During my pregnancy, I developed an unusual craving for the taste of copper. The flavor was intense, like sucking on a battery, but it provided me with an inexplicable sense of comfort. As time moved on, my cravings grew stronger. I secretly collected pennies I'd nibble on to satisfy this peculiar desire when the urge overwhelmed me. However, one evening the coins no longer satisfied me. I needed more. Frantic internet searches led me to pica, a condition characterized by an appetite for non-food items. One night, while watching a documentary about animal cannibalism, the narrator's words resonated with me. Cannibalism is a primal response to ensure survival. This unnerving statement made me realize it wasn't just metal I craved. I craved human flesh, so I disguised myself in dark clothing and went hunting. In the dead of night, my senses sharpened. Heartbeats echoed around me like drums calling me to action. I was hungry, and it was a harsh reminder of what I'd become. My first victim was a homeless man who had found shelter on the stone steps of an old cathedral. As I knelt next to him, the smell of his dirty skin mixed with a metallic scent that coursed chills along my spine. He woke up just as my teeth sunk into his flesh, far too late for him to scream out against my newfound strength. What did it taste like? Think about biting into a live wire with flavors rich in copper and iron exploding in your mouth and rushing through your veins. It felt right, natural, and yet totally terrifying. With each passing day, my condition worsened and my insatiable hunger for human flesh grew stronger with each meal. Each feast was more satisfying than the last, each blood-soaked morsel boosting my energy. My skin glowed, and my senses heightened beyond human comprehension. My body changed in ways I couldn't imagine. I wasn't just expecting anymore. I had turned into something alien. As the life grew inside me, so did the cravings. Just smelling another person made me drool and triggered an appetite that echoed in my gut. Night after night, hidden under layers of pitch-black darkness, I roamed the city streets, stalking my prey. But for every life taken, a guilt crept over me, icing my veins like frostbite. The faces of those whose lives I'd taken haunted my dreams. Somewhere deep inside me, a warning rang out. This couldn't go on forever. Payback was coming. People were catching on. Rumors from the police intensified when people around me began disappearing one after another. I knew the cops would soon connect the dots. Police sirens wailing in the distance became a common background noise while news channels buzzed with stories about my horrifying deeds. The city was on the edge of panic, its people frozen by an unseen terror. Despite the noose tightening around me, the beast inside roared louder, laughing at my guilt and basking in the raw power. It loved the fear it inspired. One fateful night, as the life inside me squirmed restlessly, I found myself standing over yet another victim. A child this time, too young and innocent. Her soft crying echoed in the quiet room, unaware of the predator lurking nearby. I stopped then, my heart pounding in my chest. My shadow cast by a dim nightlight painted a monstrous figure on the wall, a horrifying silhouette bloated with pregnancy and wrapped in darkness. The sight shocked me. Panicked, I fled to my home, exhausted, disgusted, still ravenous. A sudden knock at the door startled me. "Gretchen, it's Detective Reyes." My heart pounded in fear. Why was he here? I had already told him that Tom, my husband, was out of town for work. Quickly, I hid the jar of pennies under my bed and attempted to regain my composure before opening the door to Reyes. He looked concerned as his gaze swept over me. "Can we discuss Tom?" he asked softly. "I have more questions about the night he disappeared." I silently nodded as he stepped inside. A foul odor hit me. Not copper this time, but something far more repugnant coming from Reyes. It made me lurch forward, clutching onto a chair for support. "Tom's co-workers reported that he never showed up at his conference," Reyes stated matter-of-factly, suspicion clouding his expression. "His car was found abandoned on a highway shoulder. Can you tell me what happened the night he left?" I'm not sure," I stuttered unconvincingly. "He seemed fine when he left. Maybe car trouble?" As Reyes moved closer, sniffing curiously at the air, panic caused me to back into a table, knocking over a picture frame that shattered on impact. I stooped to pick up the torn photo from the icy concrete floor. Reyes and I shared a look, both of us staring at the picture. It was old and faded, but you could still make out young Tom and me, grinning like idiots under a bright summer sun. We were so happy then, before everything went wrong. "You kept this," Reyes said quietly, picking up an old penny from the mess on the floor. He held it up to the dim light coming in through the dusty windows. "We found one of these by Tom's abandoned car." His eyes were heavy on me, filled with a weird mix of pity and doubt. I could almost hear his thoughts. Strange disappearances, Tom's sudden absence, my odd behavior. I became acutely aware of my surroundings. The strong smell of Reyes's cologne made me feel sick, while something inside me stirred, a hunger that hit me in waves. I felt an overwhelming urge to taste metal again. Reyes didn't notice my internal struggle as he put away the penny and continued questioning me. His words became background noise as I zeroed in on his heartbeat, each beat echoing in the quiet room. My stomach twisted, repulsed, and starved at once. "Mrs. Miller?" His voice snapped me back to reality. "Are you okay? You look pale." I'm fine," I stuttered out, forcing myself to focus on his face instead of his heartbeat. The room spun around me, making Reyes's face blur. "I need to sit." With shaky hands, I pointed toward a wobbly wooden chair nearby. As I sat down heavily into it, I fought off an urge to grab Reyes's wrist and satisfy the hunger inside me. "Low blood sugar, maybe," Reyes suggested, with worry lines creasing his forehead as he reached for his phone. "No." My response was sharper than I meant it to be. "No," I said again, softer this time. "I'm fine, detective, just pregnancy issues." Reyes didn't seem convinced, but put away his phone. "Okay," he agreed slowly. "We still need to talk about Tom and the other disappearances." He sat down across from me, his eyes full of caution and curiosity. He didn't trust me. "Did you notice anything unusual about Tom before he left?" His gaze was intense. "Tom always kept to himself," I replied softly, barely above a whisper. "Work stress," I added quickly. Reyes looked doubtful but didn't push further. "There's a pattern in each disappearance, last seen after sunset, missing by morning." His words sent a chill down my spine. Was he accusing me or just sharing information? Gathering my courage, I asked, "Detective, how is this related to Tom? He's not missing, he's on business." "That's the problem," he replied calmly, crossing one leg over the other. "No one has heard from him since he left. His phone is off, and as I mentioned earlier, we found his car abandoned on the highway. I pretended to be shocked, but inside I was terrified. They had found Tom's car. Does it bother you that your husband hasn't contacted you since he left? Reyes continued. Yes, of course, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't just leave. Reyes fell silent before leaning back in his chair. I hope you're right, Mrs. Miller, he said gently. As he got up to leave, he sniffed the air again and headed toward the bathroom down the hall. May I? Wait. Before I could stop him, a wave of sickness hit me, causing everything around me to spin as I clutched my stomach. A soft whimper escaped my lips as I felt sharp pains radiating from my stomach. Reyes was already halfway down the hall, following his instincts and nose. My heart pounded in fear as he opened the door, revealing what lay beyond. Tom's decaying body in a bathtub filled with blood-red water. Reyes recoiled in shock, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun. He turned toward me, eyes widening in disbelief as he saw me doubled over in pain. His detective instincts took over and he fumbled with his radio, attempting to call for backup, but I couldn't let him do that. I fell to the ground, clutching my belly, creating a momentary distraction that worked. Reyes knelt over me, his calloused fingers brushing my pulsing wrist. Suddenly I attacked, biting into the soft skin of his neck and hitting a major artery. His blood gushed out like a burst pipe, the metallic smell filling the air. He stumbled back, clutching at his bloody neck with wide-eyed shock and fear. I felt an intense hunger as I watched his blood flow out. His police radio buzzed with garbled messages and commands as he fell to the ground. He looked at me one last time. There was fear and betrayal in his eyes before they glazed over with death. Reyes was dead because of me, another victim to my monstrous side. Drinking the detective's blood was satisfying. It stilled the beast inside me for a while. The baby in my belly kicked hard, obviously enjoying the meal too. I felt more alert as the dizziness faded away. I wiped my mouth clean, savoring the taste of iron mixed with fear. The pain hit me. It was excruciating, and it brought me to my knees. I was going into labor. It felt like being stabbed repeatedly with hot knives. The beast inside roared with eager anticipation. My last victim had been a cop. He didn't have time to call for backup, but someone would eventually start looking for him. As the morning light peeked over the horizon, I held my newborn son, his skin so soft, with no clue about what kind of food had helped him grow inside me. Tears filled my eyes, not from happiness but fear. The hunger wouldn't go away, it was always there waiting. The sound of sirens in the distance broke through the quiet morning, their wails growing louder with each heartbeat. I held my baby tighter, scared of what might happen next. They were coming for me. They would catch me. They would take him away from me. I picked up a cold, heavy gun and whispered, "I'm sorry," to him. "But Mommy will always protect you." The taste of warm metal filled my mouth again. I took a moment to savor it before I pressed the barrel against my temple. Then everything went dark.